This is Fireside Chat with me, Johnny B. Hey, good morning, y'all. Welcome back to the show. We're glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. And this is another great episode of Fireside Chats here with me, Johnny B. And today we're talking with Army veteran Alex Warner. Alex, how you doing, bud?
Doing pretty good. How are you doing, John?
Doing well. Hey, thanks for sitting down with us. Really appreciate you agreeing to take this time and tell your story. So you were in the Army.
Yeah. I served in the U.S. Army from January of 2007 until April of 2015.
Okay, wow. So you had a good period of time in there. So before you joined the Army, you had to have grown up somewhere and had a good upbringing. What went wrong and made you decide to go that route and join the Army of all things?
Yeah, I know the Army. It's a little bit better than the Navy, I will admit. But
no, not true.
But I joined so I grew up in a lot of different places. I moved around a lot as a kid. My dad, due to jobs that he had and things like that and job transfers, moved around a lot. So I lived in Valdosta, Georgia, Memphis, Tennessee, Orlando, Florida. But I was born in Germany while my dad was actually in the Army. So So I guess there's a little bit of family history there.
Yeah, a little bit of a legacy thing.
And yeah, that. And then I would also say 9/11 was a big reason that I joined the U.S. military. After seeing 9/11 happen, I just was kind of like, oh man, wow, I feel that I need to do something to help my country after one of the worst disasters since Pearl Harbor. So that was one of the big reasons that I joined the military. And then there's a Patton quote that really kind of impacted me, where he said, 30 years from now, when you're sitting by your fireside and you have your grandchild on your knee, and he asks you what you did during the Great World War II, you won't have to say, well, I shoveled expletive in Louisiana. And so I didn't want my kid or my grandkids to say to me, hey, what did you do after 9/11? And me say, well, I did nothing. I worked at a Radio Shack, or I did this. I wanted to be able to say, no, I went and did something.
Well, I don't think you'd be able to say you worked at Radio Shack for very long, seeing as to how that they didn't work
since
out.
Now it's gone. Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So that kind of, spurred everything. You had that, you grew up in the Army family, you had your dad to look up to. How did it look as growing up as a kid? Like, did you have a lot of like good structure?
Yeah, there was a lot of structure around the house. A lot of discipline was basically my dad telling me to do like the dying cockroach, or to do certain things of corrective training, where I just said to myself, man, this sucks. And then when I got into the Army, I said to myself, well, I've already done all this, so it's not that bad.
So he was preparing you.
Yeah.
In a manner of speaking. So
yes.
So when you went into the Army, you kind of had a good head on your shoulders already. Not like a lot of us where we, just went in wandering aimlessly and just found ourselves there.
Yeah, I joined the Army because of 9/11. And then also I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life at the moment. I was 20 years old at the time. I wasn't a Christian, was just kind of like, man, I don't know what to do. Just recently had moved to Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. And if you look it up, it's right outside of Lancaster, PA. And it's in the middle of like nowhere. And so, and having come from Orlando, I just said to myself, dude, this sucks. I want to get the heck out of here. I cannot stay in Elizabethtown, PA. And so the fastest way I could find to get out of Elizabethtown, PA was join the United States Army or United States military. And the Army just really kind of resonated with me.
Okay. So you got recruited. So I think I know. Basic training is down in Georgia, isn't it?
So mine was done in at Fort Benning, Georgia. It was called Fort Benning at the time. Now it's called Fort Moore, named after Colonel Hal Moore. But at the time, it was called Fort Benning. Normally, just infantry guys go there. I wasn't infantry, though. I was a pharmacy tech, and so I was a non-infantry MOS, and so I just went to basic training there. There's a lot of different places that you can go to basic. So you could go to Fort Leonard Wood, also known as Fort Lost in the Woods. You could go to Fort Jackson. You could go to Fort Sill out in Oklahoma, and I think that's it. Benning, maybe they had something at Knox, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so there's multiple sites. So, but you went to Fort Benning.
Yes, I went to Fort
Moore
Benning.
now. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. How did that go for you?
Oh man, that was interesting.
Culture shock.
It was, yeah, total culture shock. Being told to stand at parade rest when just standing in the chow line. Being told to move through the chow line really fast, and then you can only drink Powerade. That's all you could drink, even though they had every other beverage there. Coke, Sprite, Dr. Pepper, whatever you wanted type of thing. But then they had red and blue Powerade, and you had to get the Powerade. And it was really weird how they were so adamant on getting the Powerade. And then it was also really weird because there was this like white frothy layer on top, like it had a head to it. And I was like, yo, this ain't natural Powerade. Like they're putting something in this Powerade.
Well, it's the government. Of course they are.
I mean, and so it was just total culture shock, weapons immersion right away. Once you get to your unit, I want to say it's like day 2 or 3, you are immediately handed an M16 and said, hey, this is yours, guard it. Like it goes into the weapons rack every night, but it goes everywhere with you. And you're like, oh, okay, cool.
That better be the right one.
Yeah. And so you just hope, like you just carry that around with you everywhere you go. And then having your wall unit done, having to have your bed made like perfectly. And if you didn't, it got tossed. It was like, nope. Even the first day that we got, like, actually, after you did like the whole in-processing thing, and then you got to your actual unit that you were going to go through basic training at, just the getting there, and then just how they just smoke the dog crap out of you. Like from the moment you get there, they're like, it's just day 0 just sucks. Mm-hmm. Like it was probably my least favorite day. Yeah. I will admit, I remember our drill sergeant basically being in full ACUs. Army was wearing ACUs at the time, being in full ACUs, and them saying, you have 30 seconds to get out of your ACUs and into your PT gear. And I'm like, well, that ain't going to happen. That's just not going to happen. Like, it takes me almost 10 minutes to get out of this ACU uniform. And you're wanting me to get out of this in 30 seconds? Nope, not going to happen. And so you knew that you were just set up for failure right away. But it's part of the process of them breaking you down. Mm-hmm. So then once they break you down, then they can build you up in the manner that they want you.
Yeah. I think everybody listening right now is having flashbacks hearing this.
Yeah. There were moments where I straight up had like to do naked push-ups on that day, where I'm like standing there like naked, trying to change into PTs, and I didn't change into PTs in time. And I'm standing there in a bay full of guys where it's just, well, all right, cool. We're all naked and now we're all doing push-ups together. So this is awkward.
Yeah. But at least you got used to awkward.
Yes, you got used to awkward. And then 30-second showers and stuff like that. But basic training, I have to say, overall, it was a lot of fun. Like, looking back on it, if someone said, hey, you can go do basic training again, I might sit there and say, okay, I'll do that.
It's funny. How many people say that? Like over the course of the years, like we've had those conversations. You're out in, well, for us out in the fleet, but for you guys out in the field or whatever. People talk about it. It's like, looking back, I'd do it again. And then, of course, the kids going through it, they're like, oh, never again. We hate this. But it all changes after you get out and you get out into the real world, right?
Yes,
funny how that works.
But yeah, it does. But one of the things that I remember is just like Sunday being like a really like relaxing day. So even at the Army in 2007, it was just a really relaxing day. You mostly just spent your time either in ACUs or in PTs, cleaning your bay and mopping, waxing the floor, doing laundry, stuff like that. But there was also a lot of time to explore other faiths. And so one of the things that I noticed that I did when I was there was I just would go to church services because it was a way to get away from the bay. And so it would be like, oh, well, cool. I'm going to go explore like the Episcopalian Church, and I'm going to go explore Catholicism, and I'm going to go explore Hinduism and Buddhism. I will admit I loved the Jewish services, and the only reason I loved the Jewish services was because they gave you bagels. So it was kind of nice to be able to go to the Jewish service to just get a bagel for like a mid-morning snack.
Yeah, it's funny how the when you're in boot camp, just the small things like that seem like such a valuable treasure.
Yes. Yes.
So after you finished boot camp, what was next for you?
Yeah, so after boot camp, I went down to Fort Sam Houston, down in Texas, in San Antonio, and for pharmacy tech training. And so I spent 6 months down there. So I got done with boot camp in April. I want to say April of 2007. And then I was down there, and then I started pharmacy tech school in April or May, and I was there until October of 2007.
Okay. And then were there any more schools after that? I mean, I would think for pharmacy tech there might be, but
no, it was basically 6 months and then you are done. But that school has like a super high attrition rate. It has probably one of the highest attrition rates in the United States Army. I want to say it has like a 33% attrition rate. So,
oh, wow.
So you just, and it was filled with, and to get the job, you had to have chemistry and math, at least algebra, either in high school or college, and you had to have gotten a C on it. And so it's just, you had to have that. So you had a building block. And I'm not going to lie, I suck at math. Like I suck at math. And so that was probably one of the hardest aspects. But it was pharmacy tech school that really taught me how to do like algebra and figure out like, okay, so here's how you figure out an algebraic expression, type of thing. In high school, I didn't learn anything. I think I just got by doing worksheets and tutoring and stuff like that.
Yeah, just barely enough to achieve the minimum and keep moving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Basically, like get a C so that way I can maintain the 2.0 so that way I can graduate high school.
Yeah. So you wrap up there, and now you're going to get shipped off to your first unit. Where was that?
Yeah, so it was a health clinic over in Grafenwehr, Germany. Grafenwehr is known for being a training ground in Germany. And so a lot of people who have been stationed in Germany know Graf because their unit would go there to do marksmanship training, other stuff like that. And then they would also go to Vilsec, which was right next to Graf. So it's Graf Vilsec, and do marksmanship, and it's a gun range stuff. And then normally everyone would then go down to Hohenfels to do maneuvers. But I was at the health clinic in Grafenwehr, just working at the pharmacy there in the health clinic. And being at the training ground, being stationed there, it wasn't as bad as the people that had to go actually out into the field and do the training there. And so it was pretty nice. It was a lot of fun. I had a good time in Germany. Used to go around a lot and there was a many a night that I was trying to drink Germany dry. Was not a Christian at the time, so I would sit there and I was only 20 years old. So my goal was to go and meet as many women as possible, and then also drink as much alcohol as possible. And yeah, it just wasn't. It was just the same repetitive thing over and over again, and it wasn't really that life fulfilling. I was working with a captain at the time. He was my pharmacist, and he started to invite me to church with his family. And so I went to this church in Germany. It was an American church. It was a missionary, and he invited me. He would pick me up on Sunday and take me with his family to church, and then we would go to church and do that, and then I would go out to lunch with him and his family after church. And it was just really interesting. I could see God at the time just totally pursuing me through it now, looking back on it. And I really actually appreciated that. I still keep in touch with that captain. He's now a colonel in the United States Army. And yeah, really a friend of mine.
Cool. So is that when you came to Christ, or were you still, like, during that whole tour, like you were going, but you never really accepted?
Yeah, I was going, but I never believed. And I would have to say that kind of stems from a lot of stuff when I was a kid. I was raised as a Pentecostal, and I just never saw the faith exhibited out in my home. So I, like, the love that was spoken about by Jesus, I never saw exhibited out at home. Like the forgiveness and the other things that were there. There was never any, that was never shown in my house. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, well, this is just a bunch of hocus pocus. Like, this isn't real. And so I kind of went to the point of, like, being an agnostic almost. It's like, okay, well, creation kind of shows me that there must be something that created this, but I think God just created it and then stepped out of the world, type of thing, and just left it to kind of spin on its own. And so at the point, I wasn't a believer. It's this was in 2007 to 2009. So it's almost another 5, or actually like 8 years till I get saved.
Okay. So you're going through all this as an agnostic, and I think that's an important distinction. And for those of you who are wondering really about the agnosticism, basically the idea between agnostics and atheists is, it's kind of the difference between, Jedi and the Sith, right? Only a Sith deals in absolutes, just to get a little bit nerdy. But it's kind of the same thing. An atheist will say, absolutely, there is no God, there is no Satan, there's nothing. When we die, we're just worm food. Agnostics are more of, I see something, I believe that there could be something out there. It's just what that is, I don't know yet. And then that's the real difference between the two. To sum it up in a simple way. So, Alex, as you're saying that, you're agnostic at this point, I think that's an important distinction for where you're at, to say, you're coming into the world, you're pursuing the world, doing your thing, getting into alcoholism, pursuing women and, and relationships that are improper. Well, what we would call improper as believers and followers now. But your sense of morality is based on where you stand being an agnostic, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
And I had like a conservative, like a Republican conservative, like worldview type of thing, just because of how I was raised. I still held that worldview, thinking that abortion was wrong and thinking all of that stuff, just because that was kind of how I was raised. I didn't really rebel super much against that. I mostly held to that just because ultimately I think it was I agreed with the Republican policy of low taxes, and I just wanted more money in my paycheck. But the morality wasn't really there for me. So you could say I was almost kind of like libertarian on it, and type of stuff when it came to homosexuality and stuff like that. That you see that now, like, and even pursuing like improper relationships, like being like, oh well, no, like it's fine, like there's no problem with this, and just trying to do everything on my own, where it's like, no, I'm going to do what I want. Nobody else can sit there and tell me what to do, type of thing. And so thinking that I was God over my life, not realizing that there is an actual God that I must submit to. And ultimately, he is Lord of my life.
Right. So, and this is all in Germany.
Yeah. And then after Germany, I got deployment orders to Iraq. And I also got PCS orders at the exact same time to the exact same unit at Fort Bragg. So it was really kind of funny. So I either got TCS, which was temporary change of station orders, and I could TCS to Fort Bragg and then deploy to Iraq and then come back to Germany and then out process and just go attached. Or I could PCS from Germany to Fort Bragg, now known as Camp Liberty. Hate that name. It will always be Fort Bragg. So throughout the entire story, I will refer to it as Fort Bragg. And then so I could go to Fort Bragg, and then I could go deploy to Iraq, catch up with my unit in Iraq, and then serve out the rest of the time in Iraq, and then come back to Bragg, and then ultimately just be in Bragg and finish out my Army career, because I had a 4-year contract, active duty contract when I first enlisted, or I could re-enlist, type of thing. So I chose to, after a lot of discussion with people and thinking about it, I chose to PCS from Grasshopper, Germany to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Got to Fort Bragg, in process, did all of that stuff. I got there in October of 2009, and then I in processed and then hung out with the Rear Detachment Unit, also known as Rear D, until I deployed. And I hung out in Rear D from, I want to say, the beginning of November until January of 2010. And so I spent a couple months there, and then I finally got orders from my unit right before Christmas to go to CRC down at Fort Benning. And
I'm sorry. CRC?
CRC, I don't know what it stands for. I think it might be Combat Readiness Center or something like that. I'm not sure what CRC stands for, so forgive me.
Yeah, no worries.
But basically, you go there, you get issued your deployment gear, you do a bunch of medical stuff, you do slight training, IED training, garbage like that, stuff that they say is going to actually help you, but I don't know, because I'm just a pharmacy tech. You do a weapons qualification with your weapon, and then boom, you're shipped out to Iraq, and you're only there for 2 weeks, and then boom, gone. And so I went at the beginning of January, just like right after the new year, spent 2 weeks there, and then I head out to, it was either 2 weeks or a week, but then you head out to Kuwait. And so you fly out, and then you fly from Fort Benning to Bangor, Maine, and then from Bangor, Maine to Leipzig, and then from Leipzig to Kuwait City. And then you ride on the bus, and you go to Kuwait and go to Ali Al Salim Air Base, and you see the McDonald's with the Arabic writing, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And so anyways, I finally get to my unit in like middle of January, and I'm there just working, doing my thing. And then right around, I want to say like March of 2010, or it was like right after the Super Bowl. So February of 2010, I get told, hey, this pharmacy tech in Al Kut, Iraq is going to go back home for R&R. you need to go to Al Kut for just 2 weeks and you're going to cover down while there. And I'm like, all right, cool, fine. That's awesome. So I pack up. It's right after the Super Bowl. I fly out. I was actually really upset about that because I didn't get to partake in the 2 beers that you got watching the Super Bowl at that time. I was like, dude, this sucks.
That's what you were looking forward to.
Dude, I'm not going to lie. I kind of was. It was kind of like, oh man, I'm in a combat zone. I get 2 beers. This is kind of fun. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I have to fly out and then I go to Al Kut and I'm in Al Kut and, I'm with the NCOIC and this other medic that keeps coming and they keep talking a bunch. And I noticed that they're talking a lot about faith, like Christianity and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And so I start pushing back on them about their faith and whatnot, especially asking like apologetics questions. So like things about like Noah and the flood and about like dinosaurs and about Jesus and about all of this stuff, kind of pushing back on it. And it was the first time that I met Christians that actually had a reasonable defense for their faith. Because growing up in the Pentecostal church, as a kid, I was obsessed with dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs, still love dinosaurs, think they're amazing. But every time I would ask questions at church about that, I would get told, well, you just got to have faith. Or I would ask questions about like the resurrection, and it was just like, well, you just got to have faith. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't give me an answer. Like faith doesn't answer it.
What they're giving you isn't anything remotely resembling an answer.
Yes, exactly. It's just like, we just got to have faith. And it's like, yeah, but how? Like, why should I have faith in this if you can't prove it to me? And so these guys are able to actually provide answers for the question. And so I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So that really struck me and showed me like the importance for apologetics and really kind of hit me because it's like, well, these guys all had answers for those questions. Like every time, like anything that I asked, they were able to just immediately be like, boom, I got it. And so I go, okay. And so that it wasn't then that I came to faith, but it definitely resonated with me to the point where it was like, there must be something to this type of thing. And then I spent like a month there because there was a volcano that erupted in Iceland, and then it prevented people from getting back to Iraq because of the ash in the air and the jet stream. And so I ended up spending longer there.
I remember that.
Where I think you can look it up, like March 2010, volcano erupted in Iceland.
Yeah, nobody could travel back and forth across the Atlantic because of that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep, I remember that.
So I ended up spending a lot of time there, and it was there in Iraq that I say that I earned my combat patch. And so for Army guys, they'll know what a combat patch is, but a combat patch is just a patch that basically goes on your, I think it's your right shoulder. If I'm mistaken, forgive me, but I think it's your right shoulder. It's whatever side the flag is on. And so you have that, and it's there that I earn it because we're getting rocketed by insurgents. We're getting mortared. There's just lots of stuff happening there at that base. I remember specifically one night we got rocketed or mortared, like indirect fire, like 3 times within a half hour. Okay. So basically we would get rocketed, go to the bunker, hide in the bunker until we got the all clear. And then we would go to the unit to check in with the unit and say, hey, I'm alive. I'm not injured. And then go back to our choose. And then that happened 3 times and within a half hour span.
Oh, wow.
And it was during that. Yeah. And it was during that I ended up like hearing a rocket like fly like right over my head and land not far from where I was. And it was probably in that moment that I sat there and said to myself, yeah, this isn't like Call of Duty. Like there's no respawn. You die.
Yeah, there's a certain finality that comes with that.
Yeah, like they are trying to kill me. They desperately want to kill me. Not just me in general, but just any American. But if they killed me, they would be happy about it. So it was stuff like that. And then there was, when we were there was also an election during that period of time in the nation of Iraq. And so they sent a unit out to do stuff. And then one of the MRAPs got in a rollover. It was my first time that I saw like a dead body. And took like a dead body off of a helicopter. And so that really stuck with me. And so that was where I also say that like I kind of was like exposed to PTSD. One of the things that like really kind of sticks to me is when we were transporting a soldier out, one of the dead soldiers out of the hospital, and blood just started to pool from like their head because they had sustained an injury to their face from the door of the MRAP. And so basically it caused like a large amount of blood to leak from their head. And so so I struggle with that because someone told me, they were like, "Hey, Warner, go get a mop and mop this blood up." And so one of the, like, something that triggers it for me is like when I watch the operating room scene in like Black Hawk Down, that immediately comes to my mind, type of thing. I also now hate loud noises. I can't stand loud noises. So if like someone's moving pallets or stuff like that, and I hear it just drop suddenly, I'm like, what was that? Type of thing. And so it was there that I also got like my first dose of like combat or some form of combat that would like still somewhat affects me to like this day.
Yeah.
But then I went back to Tallil Air Base and spent the rest of my time in Tallil. It was pretty quiet for the most part. They didn't really do anything. Nothing really happened there. There was one day where the gym was hit by a rocket and stuff, but that was really the only time that anything happened. And then I left in October of 2010 to head back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then after that, I was in Fort Bragg. I re-enlisted in Fort Bragg to spend another 4 years in the Army. And I agreed to go to Fort Sam Houston. I actually remember calling up my branch, and saying, "Hey, what do you guys have open?" Because the pharmacy tech field is so small, you can kind of pick where you want to go if you call a branch. And so I called my branch and I said, "Hey, what do you guys have open?" And they said, "Well, we have Fort Bliss." And I was like, "No, I am not going to El Paso, Texas." "We have Fort Hood." And I go, "I am not going there because that is almost a guaranteed trip back to Iraq." Because Fort Hood at the time was basically like, "Hey, you go to there, you in process." And then they're like, "Hey, by the way, there's the plane to Iraq. Just go ahead and jump on that because you're going back." And I go, "No, I'm not doing that." And then they said, "We have Fort Sam Houston, fancy." And I was like, "Well, that sounds nice. There's a 10-to-1 ratio of girls to guys. And so I'll take that." I was dating a girl at the time. I even believe I was engaged to a girl, or I was about to get engaged to a girl that I was dating. And and so we were talking about it. And so we agreed to do another 4-year enlistment. And she would then move down to San Antonio, and we would move in together and live together and stuff like that. And then, and so I reenlist in April of 2011 for another 4 years. And because I was supposed to get out in January of 2012. And so I reenlisted, and then PCS to Fort Sam Houston. The girl that I was dating at the time, and was engaged to, like, we move in together. That relationship ends up ending horribly wrong. Goes really bad. Wedding is called off, engagement is called off, we break up, and then go our own separate ways. I end up trying to jump into another relationship right after that. and end up meeting this girl, know her for like 6 months. We get engaged and married super fast, typical Army thing, because it's like, well, I hate the barracks and I want to get out of the barracks. And so end up getting an apartment, just so I can end up getting married. So I can get an apartment just so we can live together. She was still going to school in Austin. I was living in San Antonio. And so she was doing the whole commute thing and whatnot. And so we were doing that. And then I'm sitting there like still not really looking at marriage as like what it was. So I sit there and I was like, oh, I'm married, but I was viewing it more as a contract marriage, not like marriage was like a business relationship. It wasn't something where it was like, I'm supposed to die to myself and I'm supposed to love this individual more and basically lay down my life for this person. I'm just out for my own satisfaction and own glory there.
Yeah. The typical junior enlisted, I just want to get out of the barracks. Now I'm in this marriage that's doomed to fail.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so I'm working at the hospital, working at the hospital at BAMC, going through that. There would be moments where where I would totally see me suffering from like PTSD, especially loud noises, stuff like that. Still wasn't really doing anything with faith, having nothing really to do with it. And then there was a period of time, by God's grace, that we had a bunch of satellite pharmacies, and I was in pharmacy supply. And so we had to supply those pharmacies with certain refills and with other medication. And so I would have to run it out to those pharmacies to deliver it to them and then head back to BAMC to then finish out the day type of stuff. And so our driver was out due to surgery or some kind of medical leave. And this was a good period of time. Like it was like 3 months that he was out. And so this was my job for 3 months every day. And while I was there, being that I held to a conservative worldview and Republican worldview, I was like, oh, well, cool. I'm going to I get to ride around on the radio or ride around in the car, and I get to listen to like Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all this stuff. This will be great. And so I just sit there and I start doing that and listening to them. And it was while I was doing that, my wife and I at the time, we were talking about what do I want to do when I get out. And she was like, my parents live in Dallas. We could move to Dallas. I was like, okay, cool. Dallas, that's fine. Like, I mean, I kind of want to stay in Texas. Texas is a great state. So why not stay here? And so we can move to Dallas and we'll go there and I'll get a job up there and I'll figure that out. Her parents had just bought a house. They kind of had 2 separate living areas type of thing. So we could move in with them and live there. And then I could use my GI Bill, go to school, pay them rent from my GI Bill. And while she worked and did all that stuff. And so I was like, okay, cool. We can do that. And so, but it was while doing the drive, the TMP drive stuff, that I was listening to Glenn Beck one day, and Todd Wagner from Watermark Church in Dallas was on Glenn Beck's program. And it was really kind of cool because I was listening to him talk about this stuff. And Glenn was talking about how he was doing a certain series at the time and Glenn was like, so you're doing a series at your church right now where you actually are showing how the Bible speaks against illegal immigration. I was like, that's in the Bible? Like, no way. Like, where is this in the Bible? And so Todd talks about it and everything. And I remembered Todd's name. And so I remember right as I was about to get out of the Army, I looked up Todd's name and I was like, where is this church located at? And it said Dallas. And I was like, yeah, but is it in Grapevine? Because that's not really Dallas. Or is it in Arlington? Because that's not really Dallas.
Like, where specifically in Dallas?
Yes, exactly. Where in Dallas are you located at? And I looked it up, and lo and behold, I was going to be moving to Garland, and Watermark Church is right off of 635, just up, hop, skip, and a jump away from Garland, Texas. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this almost seems like it's meant to be. And so I was doing that, and then still like was cheating on my ex-wife at the time and doing stuff like that, and just doing like really horrible stuff, deeply addicted to porn, all of that stuff. And so got out of the Army and moved to...
Real quick, if I can jump in. So I want to kind of focus on this time period, right? Where you're in San Antonio, you're brand new married, and kind of one of the things you just brought up is, you know, you're having relationships outside of your marriage. Is this how you're kind of coping with your PTSD?
Yeah, I would say that was probably a coping mechanism. I wasn't really drinking that much or drinking heavily at the time. I've never really found a lot of life in alcohol. But I did used to find a lot of life and satisfaction in sexual encounters. It felt like just like a notch, like notch on the bedpost, notch on the belt, to kind of be like, oh, cool. Like I got this one, I got this one, I got this one. Like just stuff like that. Now I am deeply ashamed of it. Now I'm like, oh man, like I am so horrible. Like I am a horrible person. And thank God for Jesus and the cross, and knowing that like on the other side of the cross that I am forgiven for all of that.
But real quick, that
was kind of my coping mechanism.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point to wrap this up for today. But it's interesting that, you know, you're coming to that point, you know, you're in Garland, or about to, you're in San Antonio, about to be in Garland, and, you know, you understand where everything is at. So, thank you for sitting down with us today, and, please stick around so we can continue the conversation. But for everybody else, we're gonna pick up next week, and we're gonna start with when he moved from San Antonio to Garland, and then we're gonna see the beauty and redemption in this. So, thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, you're listening to us here on Spotify, but we're also on Amazon, Audible, iHeart, Pocket Cast, and Google Podcasts. Please tune in, share this with your friends, and find us on Facebook. Also, if you're a veteran listening to this and you want to tell your story, please reach out to us. Go through our Facebook page, find us, like us, follow us, and reach out. The email's on there, and we would love to give you a platform to tell your story. Alex, thanks again for sitting down with us this week. Can't wait to continue this conversation with you. But for everybody else, thanks for tuning in. We'll see y'all next week.